Something just happened in Australia that could completely change the 2026 Formula One season. Mercedes didn't just win the first race, they dominated it. George Russell finished first, Antonelli finished second, and the gap to the rest of the field was enormous. But the most shocking reaction didn't come from Red Bull. It came from Ferrari. Because right after the race, Lewis Hamilton and Fred Vasseur said something that instantly caught the attention of the entire paddock. They started talking about the Mercedes engine, and what they revealed suggests Mercedes may have been hiding performance all weekend. Here is the crazy part. During practice, Ferrari actually looked like the fastest team. Leclerc first, Hamilton second. A Ferrari won two on the timing screens. Everything looked perfect, but then qualifying started, and suddenly Mercedes was almost 8/10ths faster than Ferrari. 8/10ths. In modern Formula One, that gap is massive. So what really happened? Did Mercedes hide their true engine power until qualifying? Did Ferrari underestimate the real performance of the Mercedes power unit? And why did Lewis Hamilton, a driver who spent more than a decade inside Mercedes, suddenly start comparing the Ferrari engine directly to his old team? Because when you combine Hamilton's comments, Vasseur's reaction, and the data from the Australian Grand Prix, a much bigger story begins to appear. The first real clues about Ferrari's performance in Australia actually appeared long before the race even started. Friday practice, the moment when teams finally stop guessing and start revealing their true potential. And right away, Ferrari sent a very clear message to the rest of the grid. Charles Leclerc finished the first practice session in first place. Lewis Hamilton finished second. A Ferrari won two, and the gap to the rest of the field was not small. For a few hours, the paddock began whispering the same question. Did Ferrari just build the fastest car of the new era? Because the SF26 looked incredibly comfortable at Albert Park. Through the fast direction changes, through the medium speed corners, the car looked planted, stable, confident. And when drivers feel that kind of balance early in a season, it usually means the aerodynamic platform is working exactly as intended. But there was another detail hidden inside those practice runs. Ferrari engineers were experimenting with the hybrid system. Several analysts noticed that the car was not always using full electrical deployment. In certain sectors, the Ferrari appeared to hold back energy, then suddenly release it on the straights. That pattern suggested something interesting. Ferrari was not chasing headline lap times. They were studying efficiency, how the new power unit delivered power, how the battery deployment behaved across an entire lap. In other words, Ferrari looked like a team preparing for the race, not just qualifying. And Lewis Hamilton seemed surprisingly comfortable inside this new environment. Remember, this is still a relatively new chapter in his career. After more than a decade driving Mercedes power cars, Hamilton now had to adapt to Ferrari's completely different philosophy. Different engine characteristics, different energy management, different balance. And yet, during those early sessions, he looked relaxed, precise, controlled, almost like a driver rediscovering confidence after a difficult period. But this is where the weekend begins to take a strange turn. Because while Ferrari was showing strong pace during practice, Mercedes looked almost quiet. Their lap times were competitive, but not spectacular. Nothing suggested they were about to dominate qualifying. Nothing suggested they were hiding something extraordinary. At least, that is what it looked like from the outside. Inside the garages, however, engineers pay attention to details most viewers never see. Acceleration traces, energy deployment curves, sector micro times. And in those small details, some teams began to notice something unusual. The Mercedes cars were extremely strong on exit, especially in the acceleration zones, which raised an uncomfortable possibility. What if Mercedes was not showing its full engine power yet? What if the real performance had not been revealed? And that exact suspicion would return with much more force just 24 hours later. Because when qualifying began on Saturday, everything changed. Saturday in Melbourne is when the masks usually come off. Practice sessions are about experiments. Qualifying is about truth. And the moment Q1 began at Albert Park, the entire competitive picture of the weekend started to shift. Ferrari still looked strong. The SF26 was balanced, predictable, fast enough to reach the final stages of qualifying. But when the final runs arrived, something unexpected happened. Mercedes suddenly unleashed a level of performance nobody had seen during practice. George Russell delivered a stunning lap, precise through the fast chicanes, aggressive on corner exit. And when the lap time appeared on the screen, the reaction inside several garages was immediate. The gap was huge. nearly 8/10 of a second faster than Ferrari. In modern Formula One, 8/10 in qualifying is enormous. Is the difference between fighting for pole position and fighting just to stay close to the front. Charles Leclerc ended qualifying in 4th position. Lewis Hamilton qualified 7th. Solid positions, but nowhere near the pace of the Mercedes. And Leclerc did not try to hide his surprise. After the session, he spoke very openly about what he believed had happened. According to him, Ferrari might have misunderstood Mercedes during practice, because the pace Mercedes showed on Saturday felt completely different from what they showed on Friday. Much faster, much more aggressive. And Leclerc suggested a possibility that instantly spread through the paddock. Mercedes may have been running their engine at reduced power during practice, saving the real performance for qualifying. If that theory is correct, it changes how teams interpret the entire weekend, because Formula One teams constantly analyze each other's data. Sector times, acceleration traces, top speed figures. They build models to estimate how much power a rival engine produces. But if one team deliberately hides its real output until the crucial moment, those models suddenly become unreliable. And that is exactly the kind of situation that can shock rival engineers. For Ferrari, the surprise was significant, because their own car had behaved exactly as expected. The SF26 had strong aerodynamic grip, a stable rear end, excellent balance through the fast direction changes of Albert Park. But when it came to pure one-lap performance, Mercedes appeared to have something extra, something hidden. And that discovery immediately forced Ferrari to rethink their expectations for the race, because starting 4th and 7th changes the entire strategy of a Grand Prix. Instead of attacking the front, you are managing traffic, defending position, trying to recover ground. And that meant Sunday would become a very different challenge for both Ferrari drivers. But when the lights finally went out for the Australian Grand Prix, another surprising detail began to appear. Because while Mercedes looked untouchable over one lap, the race pace of the Ferrari told a slightly different story. Sunday in Melbourne was supposed to confirm what everyone believed after qualifying. Mercedes was the fastest car, Ferrari was chasing, and the race would simply follow that order. But Formula One races rarely stay that predictable, because once the lights went out, the behavior of the SF26 started to reveal something interesting. Something Ferrari engineers had already suspected on Friday. The car was extremely strong over long runs. Right from the first laps, Charles Leclerc settled into a very controlled rhythm. No dramatic moves, no unnecessary risks, just consistent lap times. And that is exactly where the Ferrari began to show its real strength. Tire management. Albert Park is a circuit that punishes aggressive cars. If the rear tires start overheating, the lap times collapse very quickly. But the SF26 remained stable. Lap after lap, the balance stayed predictable. The car rotated smoothly through the medium speed corners. And most importantly, the rear tires stayed alive longer than many rivals expected. That allowed Leclerc to stay connected to the front group. Not close enough to attack the Mercedes, but close enough to remain inside the fight for the podium. And that alone was an important signal for Ferrari, because while Mercedes appeared to have a very aggressive qualifying mode, Ferrari looked extremely efficient over a full race distance. Meanwhile, Lewis Hamilton's race followed a very different story. Starting 7th meant one thing: traffic. Lots of traffic. Modern Formula One makes overtaking difficult, even for the best drivers in the world. Dirty air affects braking stability. It affects tire temperatures. It affects energy deployment. But Hamilton approached the race the way experienced champions always do. Patient, measured. He waited for the right opportunities, then executed clean overtakes without destroying his tires. Position by position, he began climbing through the field. What stood out most was how comfortable he looked with the car. Smooth steering inputs, controlled braking, very precise energy usage on the exits. For a driver still adapting to a completely new team and power unit, that kind of rhythm was a very positive sign. Because the biggest challenge for Hamilton moving from Mercedes to Ferrari was always going to be adaptation. Different engine response, different hybrid deployment, different rear balance. But during the race in Australia, Hamilton finally looked like a driver who understood the car. And that is exactly what Ferrari wanted to see. By the middle phase of the race, the picture at the front was becoming clearer. Mercedes still controlled the race. Their pace was simply too strong. But Ferrari had firmly established itself as the second strongest team on track. Ahead of Red Bull, ahead of McLaren, And that matters enormously for the championship, because the first race of the season is not only about victory. It is about understanding where you truly stand. For Ferrari, the message was clear. The SF26 has the pace to fight at the front. It has the stability needed for long races. And with drivers like Leclerc and Hamilton extracting consistent performance, the team now has a very powerful combination. But the real moment that changed the tone of the weekend did not come during the race itself. It came afterward, during the interviews. Because when Lewis Hamilton and Fred Vasseur began speaking about the performance of the Mercedes engine, their words revealed something that many people had only suspected until that moment. And what they suggested could completely change how the entire paddock interprets the Australian Grand Prix.